Live from Arlington, Virginia, this is Transport Topics Newsmakers, the digital interview series that gives you access to candid conversations between industry experts and a veteran reporter. Thanks go to our sponsor, Netrodyne. Here's your host, Dan Ronan.
Welcome to the latest edition of Newsmakers from Transport Topics. I'm Dan Ronan. I'm honored to host this conversation with leading figures in the trucking, freight, and logistics industry. Today, I believe we will have a very interesting and timely conversation discussing a very important topic in the trucking industry, the driver shortage, capacity, and what fleets can do to retain their drivers during these critical times. Joining us to discuss this issue is Jeremy Reymer, a good friend of Transport Topics. He is the founder and CEO of the Indianapolis-based Driver Reach. Jeremy, as you know, brings more than 15 years of experience in trucking as both a carrier and a vendor, having led a small truckload operation as well as a regional CDL staffing company. He's a member of the ATA's Workforce Development Committee and ATRI's Research and Advisory Committee. In 2016, he founded Driver Reach, a modern recruiting management solution to address the issues of driver staffing and the driver shortage. We'll begin our conversation with Jeremy after this message from our sponsor, Netrodyne.
Netrodyne's Driver Eye is the most advanced video fleet safety solution, with artificial intelligence and edge computing built into the device to capture and analyze data immediately, creating real-time alerts for avoiding risky situations. With the highest definition camera on the market, Driver Eye offers clear visibility, including details such as license plates. The advanced AI recognizes speed limit signs, stoplights, stop signs, following distance, pedestrians, and other objects that most dash cams cannot detect. The optional interior camera captures and alerts on distracted or drowsy driving and seatbelt use, thus reducing risky driver behavior immediately. Netrodyne is the only safety system that captures and analyzes 100% of drive time, which provides a more complete safety picture, removing the guesswork for fleet managers and revealing the true cause of driving events. Managers can quickly see how each driver is performing through straightforward report summaries in the portal, without viewing a single video. Driver Eye captures and highlights proactive driving events, such as creating space for merging vehicles. These events add points to the driver score. Green Zone is the industry's first and only driver score built on positive driving versus solely focusing on negative events. The Driver Eye mobile app dynamically calculates the score, comparing it to the fleet average and congratulating drivers when they reach key milestones. Drivers can self-coach by reviewing key events with accompanying suggestions on how to improve performance and increase their scores. The virtual coach feature sends a weekly push alert for drivers to review their brief session via the app. Proof of session completion is documented in the portal. The Green Zone scores also provide an easy way for managers to reward drivers with prizes or bonuses. This positive recognition-based approach enables balanced interactions between managers and drivers, ultimately resulting in reduced risk and a safer fleet.
And now we begin our conversation with Jeremy. He joins us, as I said, from Indianapolis. Jeremy, welcome to TT's Newsmakers. How would you describe the driver shortage at this point in time, almost a year into the pandemic? Where are we at?
That's a great question. I think, frankly, Dan, I think this is as bad as I've ever seen it. It's the demand for drivers is so strong right now, and it's impressive, but it's at the same time, it's causing a lot of heartburn across the industry. It's really hard to hire drivers right now.
So if you have a CDL and a pretty good driving record, you have a valuable commodity in your wallet.
No question. Absolutely. Great opportunity for you if you've got a clean record. That's when we say driver shortage, I think it's important to also reference the fact it's a quality driver shortage. You know, it's drivers who are hireable, who are employable. There's not just a CDL holder, but those who are. That's always been the case, but it's certainly it's much tighter today than I've ever seen it in my going on 18 years in the industry.
Do you have a specific number, Jeremy, in line about what the driver shortage may be? You say it's the worst we've had in your time in the industry. The ATA's Bob Costello puts the number. I talked with him the other day. He says it's upwards of 60,000 plus. Does that sound about right?
It does. Now, I think the challenge here is you don't have a lot of really good data for 2020 yet to see how many drivers are in the industry, how many new entrants came into the industry versus left. But what we do know or at least what we believe, is that a significantly higher number of drivers left the industry in 2020 than an average year. And
is that because of COVID?
I think primarily because of COVID. And I think, we may touch on the clearinghouse, but that certainly had an impact. But at the end of the day, if you're a long haul carrier and a driver of yours is concerned about their health and security from a COVID standpoint, that they don't feel safe. They don't feel comfortable. They might leave the industry either permanently or at least until this kind of blows past us.
But why would a driver want to leave the industry? And I can certainly understand their concerns about health and the like, but the old expression, make hay while the sun shines, and certainly this is a good time, at least since June, in terms of the opportunity to make money because rates are so high, both contract and spot rates. You would think that a lot of people would say, you know what, the company's doing what it needs to do to keep the trucks clean. We've gone to touchless delivery or more drop and hook. I'm going to see if I can't make this work for a while.
Yeah, but the rest of that statement isn't say make hay while the sun shines during a global pandemic. I think that's the asterisk there. So from that perspective, hopefully, as they feel safer and as vaccine continues to roll out, especially those that aren't in the in that category that's most susceptible, getting back into the workforce is huge.
One of the things too that you and I talked about this about a year ago, there were a number of companies that went into bankruptcy. And it seemed as though that, and this is all pre-pandemic, it seemed as though even at that point that those drivers who were affected by the bankruptcies in these carriers, they had job offers and they were being recruited almost immediately. Is that still the case?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We're not seeing the bankruptcies like we were then. I think the challenge that most companies are having today is they've got demand for freight. They've got trucks, they've got equipment. They need the resource, the driver resource, and that's it's a huge challenge. But yeah, that hasn't changed. That dynamic that you just mentioned hasn't changed.
I know of one fleet up in the Northeast that primarily is an oil and petroleum company. They do heating oil and they do diesel and unleaded gasoline and the like. And when the pandemic started, we saw the big drop off in gasoline and diesel, again, March, April, May. But this particular fleet went out and got flatbeds, and a lot of their drivers were trained to drive flatbeds because that's a little bit different. And they're at the higher end of the skill level, also having been hazmat tech drivers. And they added this particular business line to the company, and it's going very well.
I would think, though, that's a tough one to fill. The compensation is probably commensurate to the type of work that they do, but that's a tough one to fill. And I think especially this year because of COVID, anything that keeps a driver away from home for extended periods of time is a greater challenge. And so companies that are hiring, a good friend of mine runs the recruiting department for a company that spots trailers at warehouses. Not the same challenge that others have because those drivers are home every day. They're working local and they're home every day. They have more control over the environment that they're operating in under the circumstances.
But isn't the industry, and we've talked about this the last, I don't know how many times you and I have had this conversation. The industry is moving away from the 600, 500 mile a day driver who's out there, pounding away. It's becoming more regionally based. And it would seem as though, from what I'm hearing in the business, that a lot of companies are starting to, develop warehouses that are maybe closer to their customers, so that we don't have those drivers. There are many of them. Let's not be unclear about this, but there are less of those men and women who are out there going from the Atlantic to the Pacific in 6 or 7 days.
Yeah, and that's been an ongoing evolution, and it's not something that happens overnight. But I think that's been a dynamic that's been in place for probably close to the last decade, and I think that'll continue to evolve. And you'll have a more hub and spoke mentality because you kind of have to, and it's more appealing, but it's also more expensive, and it's so it's going to take time to get that sort of an infrastructure in place that will accommodate that dynamic. Because when you can have a driver home every day, that's gold. But that's But many companies don't operate that way, and it's not a snap of fingers and you can, incorporate that.
We've done a lot of reporting at ttnews.com about tightness and capacity in the industry. How much of that is related to the driver shortage and the fact that the industry right now in terms of capacity is just as tight as the experts say they've seen in years?
Well, it's a lot to do with the driver shortage. Certainly a significant percentage. But that being said, the industry is torn on what to do about it. As I've shared before, I'm a huge proponent of the idea of creating a path for high school graduates to get into the industry, to earn their CDL in interstate capacity, and get into the industry. However, there are a lot of carriers who, although they understand that might do a great service to reduce the shortage that we're talking about now, the double-edged sword here is that it also will have a negative impact on their ability to hold rates firm and continue to increase rates with their customers. So that's kind of the conundrum that we're in. But the driver shortage is certainly driving that.
Isn't the insurance industry also dictating a lot in terms of the availability of young men and women to get into the industry? Because I've got a son who's learning how to drive an automobile now, 17. And I know that the minute he gets a driver's license, my rates, even though I'm a good driver and I haven't had any accidents, my rates are going to go through the roof. And I mean, if you're a trucking company, and insurance right now in the industry is so tight and so expensive, do I really want to take the risk of adding a 19 or 20-year-old? They may be a great driver, but I know that my insurance premiums are going to go up 25%.
Yeah, initially, there's no question that's likely to happen. And just to be clear, this isn't something I think is going to happen anytime within the next 5 years. But that being said, there's a heavy dose of training. I mean, that's the biggest component of it. This is not possible to do this without some serious training that is at a level that doesn't exist today in the industry for any driver, 21 and over or not. So once that is in place, and I think you have data to prove out that these drivers are well trained and as safe or more than anyone else, then I think that will, it'll correct itself. But also, I would like to add, though, real quick, Dan, that a lot of the insurance underwriters have been a part of this whole process of creating the training and the curriculum, the requirements for a move towards a minimum age of 18 for CDL drivers.
Just as an aside, Jeremy, I don't know that you know this, but you can get a private pilot's license and fly a Cessna 172 or 182. You can get that at age 16. I mean, a lot of young, great aviators who have gone on to fabulous things, such as Neil Armstrong, the first man who walked on the moon in July 1969, got his private pilot's license at age 16. Good thing.
Point made. Touche.
You brought up the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, and I want to talk about that and spend a couple minutes chatting about that. The latest figures show that we've seen close to 50,000 drivers who have been disqualified because of drug and alcohol issues, but only a fraction of them have begun the process to get reinstatement. What does that mean?
It means that the roads are safer. I mean, that's one thing. And I have been the hugest advocate of a clearinghouse for as long as I've been in the industry. When I first heard about it, and I think that goes back maybe around 2005 or 2006 when I first heard about it as a potential federal regulation. That being said, I think it's got unanimous support across the industry. But the challenge and the sad tale is that's 50,000+ drivers that are no longer in the industry, and that's those who have been caught in 2020. There are undoubtedly more who either just haven't had a drug test during that year, or at the end of the day, I think what we're talking about here is we have safer roads as a result. But that's 50,000+ drivers that are gone. That's hard. That's hard on the industry when the demand is so tight. We've got to be able to replace them, but with drivers that aren't failing drug tests.
And the other issue is that because of COVID, all of the DMVs across the states have been shut down or operating at reduced hours. And so if you are gone through the CDL training program and you're ready to go get your license and go take the test, you have to, in some cases, go online, make an appointment, get the examiner, and then wait 5 or 6 or 7 weeks for your time to come up for your test to be held. I mean, that is a discouraging factor when it comes to, and you got to be pretty persistent. You really have to want it to go through the process and get the training, and then wait to take the test.
Well, in a normal year, commercial driver, schools, especially, CVTA members, and talking with Don LaFave late last year, he referenced the fact that their school, their members, the Commercial Vehicle Training Association, they're down 33%. Their production of drivers that they've been able to put into the force was reduced by a third. And I think overall, what we're looking at is possibly somewhere in the area of about 60 to 75,000 drivers in a normal year that enter into the industry. You talk about maybe 20 to 25,000 are gone. Weren't able to, bring them into the industry. So when you have a much larger number of drivers leaving the industry because of COVID, in large part, among other things, and then on the other side of that, new entrants are, a third, or I should say 2/3 of what they normally are. That's a very large disparity. And then let's add to that the clearinghouse, the elimination of drivers from the clearinghouse. And I think those are the types of things that where Bob Costello's numbers of 60,000, give or take, that's where they stem from.
Jeremy, we're at about the halfway point in our discussion here on Transport Topics Newsmakers, and I think we've done a pretty good job in the 15 minutes or so of discussing the extent of the problem and what the industry faces in terms of the challenges that are ahead. I want to spend the next 15, 17 minutes discussing some of the solutions, because in the time that you and I have been friends, the 3 or 4 years, you've always struck me as a solutions type of guy. How do we find a way to fix the problem? So let's start on a very broad brush. How do we fix the problem?
Well, we've got to get more drivers into the industry, and I won't beat a dead horse as far as my viewpoints on the 18-year-old issue, but the other is just image of the industry. And I know the ATA is doing a great job, and fortunately, I think with COVID, we have also the opportunity to really the industry's been highlighted, as essential workers. The industry is probably, I haven't seen in my career as much support and interest in trucking as because of COVID. And so this is one of those examples of not letting a good crisis go to waste. And I'll say that for 2 reasons. One, certainly it's an opportunity to get more people into the industry, recognizing the income that they can make, which is substantial, and the image that the industry is garnered as a result of this crisis. But also, as a recruiter, as a company that is involved, they have a recruiting department. Every trucking company, they have somebody who's involved with that. There's such a good opportunity right now to be so much more human, and interact with drivers in a way that's more genuine because of this crisis. The quality of the conversations that you can have are so much deeper and greater because we're all dealing with these challenges. And I think that's really important to leverage that as much as you can. It's not disingenuous, but it's an opportunity. Again, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Retention is an important part of the whole driver life cycle. You've got to be able to retain the drivers that you've got. And that starts with recruiting and being open and communicative and making sure that you align from the beginning. Those are the types of things that are going to help keep that driver for the long haul.
Many, many years ago, I worked for an insurance company as their media spokesman in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I was always amazed by the cost when I would sit down on these meetings with the senior staff about the cost of replacement of employees if you have a certain percentage of turnover every year, whether it's for retirements or resignations or whatever it is. It costs a lot of money to bring someone on and get them trained and learn your system and the computer systems and then the culture, of course. It costs a lot of money. So it always seemed to me that if you get a good employee, that the best thing to do is figure out a way to keep them, because on the back end, you're going to just keep spinning and throwing money right down the right down the HR chute into their budget to bring more people in to lose 15, 18, 20% of them every year in the turnover.
Yeah, there's no question. The old adage, the best way to recruit drivers is to keep the ones you got. I mean, that just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
But there are opportunities. I'll in COVID, again, this is not letting a good crisis go to waste again. Companies embrace technology, and not just in trucking, across all industries, in a way that they hadn't before. And I'm not saying that, typically the phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. In this case, it really was necessity is the mother of adoption. And companies really embraced and adopted technology in a way that helped them to operate more efficiently, in some cases remotely, out of necessity. And as a result, when you can incorporate good technology to help with the process, especially in such a highly regulated industry as trucking, incorporating that technology to help manage that process and get drivers hired so much more faster and more efficiently, that'll make a really big difference. Because at the end of the day, that driver is probably applying. If they're applying for a job anywhere, it's generally several companies at a time. The company that can move the fastest and give that driver a better experience is often going to be the more successful one.
Many companies, as you know, are taking some pretty significant steps to raise compensation. They did it in 2017, 2018 during when the economy was going great guns. Pay is important. It really is. I mean, I get it. Is this the best way to retain drivers and hang on to your real stars, or is it just a Band-Aid?
Well, it's not a Band-Aid. I think that there is I think any company understands that, you've got to make sure that these drivers are well compensated, and making sure that they're compensated for all the work they're doing, not just for the miles that they're driving, but oftentimes they're sitting for an extended period of time. We've got to find ways to make sure that we're compensating them for that so they don't feel shortchanged. Compensation is a really big part of it, but it's also, that's a component of the culture that you need to create with them. And transparency, humility, honesty, all of those things are qualities that anybody wants in any employment relationship. And that still is necessary.
Some companies, Jeremy, have gone to, making employees of the company owners of the company. I know that there's a prominent company in Central Illinois that's done that. About 40% of the company is employee owned. Is that going to be something that we see more of a trend to? That again, if you own a piece of the company, if you're a stakeholder in what's going on, does that keep you vested in the operation?
I think it does, but I also think it's hard to take an existing company and then just say, we're going to start doing this. I think it's important that you have that mindset. You might want to create that sort of a structure, but then you've got to go and find the right people who are motivated by that, who want to be vested in that. But I love the concept because they do share in the success of the organization. There's an additional, oomph, behind their effort. But it's not for everybody. Not everybody's wired that way.
I covered the airlines for many years in various jobs, and the old line was that when a pilot comes on, he's married to that company, he or she, until they're 60 and now 65 years old. They're going to be with them until the end. I mean, you hope to go on through the regional routine, and 28, 29, 30, you get out with Delta, United, American, Southwest, or one of the big guys like that. And you ride your career. You become a captain eventually through the process of a seniority. Does the trucking industry need to look at that model somewhere down the road? We're always going to have churn. We're always going to have turnover. But if we can get things stable like that, isn't there something to be said for that model that the airlines have so successfully
Well,
utilized?
the challenge there is, first of all, just the average age of a new entrant in the industry is 35. Which is another, that's a whole nother, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that is an issue. But let's say I'm 35 and I get a CDL and I'm going to be a long haul driver, and, I'm going to go through, I'm going to have to pay my dues a little bit. I'm probably going to be gone for a long time, but then I'm going to get married. I find somebody that I want to, be a partner, and then we're going to have children. Well, I can't have that. That doesn't work. It's not going to work well. It's a recipe for disaster in some cases. And so I'm going to have to leave because of lifestyle demand changes. And so from that perspective, I think, they're not all the same. And sometimes some people, they may never settle down. They may be able to be long haul forever, and that's great. But if they do have changes in their life, in order to ensure they can stay and the tenure remains, you got to be able to adjust and accommodate for what they need, or they'll just go out and find something that does check that box for them and provide the stability that they need.
But those companies that have taken on this model of the airlines, and I think of two of the big logistics and freight haulers in the world, FedEx and UPS. I mean, those jobs to become a UPS driver, whether it's driving UPS freight or you're driving the conventional brown truck into the neighborhood to drop off packages, those jobs are coveted. They've got phenomenal benefits. They've got a lot of stability because they know the company has been around for 100 plus years. In the case of FedEx, more than 50 years. Those are really great jobs. Or if you're driving for a private fleet, those are jobs that seem to have more stability than if you're driving for a company that's doing over the road from Boston to South Dakota.
Right. Unfortunately, that's not most. Right. That those are great, and I agree. The companies that you named are fantastic and have great reputation, and many drivers retire from them, and some of the best drivers in the nation. But that being said, most companies are not that. Most companies are small, 20 trucks and under. And so when you've got 130,000 companies that aren't that way, drivers that are working for all those much smaller fleets don't have that same dynamic, that same flexibility as well.
So this is going to take a challenge that's going to take years to solve. And I ask you the question because the demographics are challenging here. It seems as though attracting young people to the industry is very difficult, especially when young people, young men and women the age that my son, they are encouraged in the last 40 or 50 years. We've really encouraged them as parents and as guidance counselors. We've encouraged them to go to State U and not to go into the trades and those traditional routes, which were at one time very much a guaranteed way to a middle-class lifestyle, whether it was the trades or driving a truck. Those areas have been discouraged. And in some quarters, I hate to say this, but in some quarters they're looked down upon when they're really needed. They're vital jobs to society.
Well, it'll take time to change that. I agree. But to your point, when you graduate, first of all, when you graduate from high school at 18, the path to trucking doesn't exist by and large. And so if you're going to go to college, and let's say you graduate college at 21, 22 years old, the last thing you're going to do right then is drive a truck. How are you going to explain that? How are you going to justify that when you've got student loan debt in an area that has nothing to do with trucking? That's a tough one. And so that person probably fumbles along for, a few years, maybe 10 years or so before they end up, becoming a truck driver by default. And so we've got to find a way to get right now, because 21 is the minimum age, we've got to find a way to get 21-year-olds, earning a CDL and being able to operate interstate. But the reality is very few of them are doing that. And I think, to your point, a lot of that is because they are encouraged to go to college. And frankly, it's not cut out for everybody.
Yeah. There's also been such a shift, Jeremy, in the last couple of years to this e-commerce economy. There's new numbers out from MasterCard over the Christmas holiday that the percentage of e-commerce in the economy went from 13 to 20% in just a matter of months. I mean, it's astounding the amount of stuff that we're buying. With the increase in the number of drivers now driving local from either Amazon or other companies and using this, doing this without a CDL, driving sprinters, can this be an area where the over-the-road or the more traditional trucking industry can use this as an entry point for young people getting into the industry?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see that now, and I think that's a great point. The challenge is going to be if you can make good enough money, always driving Sprinter vans and being home every day, is what's the carrot that gets them to earn a CDL and be over the road, or an even sort of a regional capacity. So I think that's the rub there, is compensation is going to play a big role. But as long as you can get those drivers at a young enough age where they don't have all the, hate to say baggage, but they don't have all the, the family and the children and the responsibilities that really precludes them from having that sort of lifestyle. I think that would be, that's optimal.
About 7 or 8% of the industry is made up of women. What can be done to increase that percentage? And if we could get it up to 20%, 19%, would that significantly ease the driver shortage?
Well, I think not only would it ease the driver shortage, it would improve the image.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the image is part of the reason why we have the challenge that we do. I'm sure you're familiar with Ellen Voyer and Women in Trucking and the great work that she's doing. And as a supporter and an advocate, I love the idea of really creating an environment where you can attract more women to the industry. I think when they feel safe and secure and they feel respected and they feel like the image of the industry is improving, those are all factors that will improve the results of getting more women into the industry. But another thing that we don't even think about, in some cases, even it's a manufacturing issue. The truck manufacturers, the OEMs, there are women that are significantly shorter than men. There are instances where you can slide that seat all the way up and you can't reach the pedals if you're not tall enough. So you've got to be able to even think through those types of issues and reconcile them, or you're going to you're not going to be able to accommodate some of the smaller ones.
Got time for just a couple more questions, Jeremy. What about this thing that's been ongoing for many, many years now of attracting men and women who are separating from the armed forces? Has that been working as well as you had hoped?
No, sadly, no. I think every single carrier out there would love to hire veterans and put them to work in whatever capacity they possibly can. And it seems that it's just so fragmented, and there's so many different groups that will say that they help, get these veterans into job opportunities, but I don't feel like it's being executed as well as it could be. And that's, to me, that's part of the shame. Now, I don't think that a lot of those who are interested in operating in a CDL capacity are having a hard time finding that job. But I know, as a former employer, I felt like there was something broken in this process, and I don't know that that's been remedied yet.
Jeremy, you're a passionate individual about this. The many times that we've talked in person or on Transport Topics Radio or in what other circumstances, you're very passionate about this. It's made, what your career is all about. Are you optimistic, though, in the long run? Let's look long term, that we can attract more quality people into the industry, either as drivers or technicians or logistics professionals, that eventually this problem will be maybe not solved, but we'll be doing a better job as an industry?
I am, because I think we love the industry. We're passionate about it. We believe in it, and we solve problems. That's what, I certainly want to be a part of it, which is why I'm honored to be a part of the ATA's Workforce Development Committee, honored to be a part of ATRI's RAC. But there are the challenges, when you talk to people that are not from the industry, what I hear oftentimes is, it doesn't even matter, because there aren't going to be CDL drivers anymore because all the trucks will be autonomous. And I think, I honestly, as much as I know technology is evolving at such a rapid pace, that is not something that I believe will happen in my lifetime. It's certainly not to that extent. We will improve technology in cabs. I drive a car, an electric vehicle that has autonomous functionality, and that is a great experience. It enhances my driving experience and some safety functionality as well. I think that is the type of thing that is going to help the industry attract more new entrants and younger entrants as well. But in the grand scheme of things, I do not believe that the solution to the problem that we're talking about today is the elimination of an entire workforce and replace with an empty truck. I just don't think that's feasible.
I also think that there's a public acceptance point of view here that, we all know that every time we get into a nice new airplane, whether it's a Boeing or an Airbus, that the computer and the flight management system is doing most of the work. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, but when something goes wrong, I want a gray-haired, experienced Captain Sullenberg in the left seat who knows exactly what to do to turn on the auxiliary power unit and, make a decision. And I don't think we're at that point, probably not in our careers, Jeremy, where we will see trucks 75 to 80,000 pounds lumbering down I-95 without anybody up front. I don't think it's feasible. Maybe on some freight corridors across the country, or in drayage or in ports, those type of arrangements where it's a controlled environment, probably. But do I see that happening on, I-95, along the eastern seaboard between Bangor, Maine to the Florida Keys? I'm not so sure about that. I don't think we're going to see that in our careers. That's just my opinion, and your opinion as well, my friend.
Yeah, I agree.
Jeremy, I want to thank you for joining us and being a part of this Transport Topics Newsmakers. We can always find out more about Driver Reach at the website, driverreach.com. And of course, we want to thank our sponsor, Netrodyne. You can always reach out to me at dronan@ttnews.com. I'm also on Twitter as well, at dronantranspo. That's at dronantranspo. Going forward, we have more of these newsmakers planned in the very near future, and we'll have an announcement soon about our next webcast, who the guest will be, and when it will take place. Also, this webcast is available for viewing on demand. Go to ttnews.com. On behalf of Jeremy Reymer from Driver Reach, I'm Dan Ronan from ttnews.com. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information on future episodes, visit ttnews.com. This has been Transport Topics Newsmakers.